Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Minimalist Gourmet, where today I've got a real special one for you. We're making chicken pot pie, but we're going to do everything from scratch. That's right, we'll be making the biscuits from scratch, the cream of chicken soup from scratch, cooking up some juicy chicken, and throwing it together with some absolutely delicious vegetables to make one delicious pot pie. Let's get started. We'll begin with the biscuits, and we need 2 cups of all-purpose flour in a nice big bowl. We have 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Put this in with your flour and give everything a quick mix. Now grab yourself a grater and a stick of butter. But this butter is not normal. I put it in the freezer about an hour ago and it is frozen solid. Now we're going to take this frozen stick of butter and grate it. If you've never used this technique before, it is great. It helps make biscuits really tender and flaky and allows the butter to integrate into the flour a lot quicker. It's very important that we work as quickly as we can here, safely of course, because we want all of our ingredients to stay as cold as possible while making biscuits. Once you have grated your stick of butter completely, we're going to put that in with our flour mixture. Now, I'm going to be cutting it today with a pastry cutter. This is the best tool for the job. However, if you don't have one, a regular fork will work just fine. You can use either the fork or the pastry cutter, whatever you have will work. However, I don't recommend using your fingers or your hands to cut in the butter because your hands carry a lot of heat with them and they can melt the butter. So it's better to use a utensil. Work the fat into the flour mixture until the consistency is like very fine sand or very fine cornmeal. I'm going to start with 1 1/4 cup of very cold buttermilk. Now, I might use more, I don't know. We'll find that out later depending on how thirsty our flour mixture is. But to start, we're just going to start with 1 1/4 cups of very well chilled buttermilk and 1 egg. We're going to mix this up, but the goal when making biscuits is to mix your batter as little as possible until it just comes together thoroughly. All right, so don't be too aggressive here. Just take a few seconds, do some nice big stirs, and evaluate your dough as you go. Now, I can see here that this is not going to be enough buttermilk, so I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more. I ended up using about another 1/4 cup, so my total was about 1 1/2 cups. How much you use will really depend on how much your flour will absorb. Now, the way you can tell this is that your dough will just come together like this but still be sticky. Once it forms a ball and pulls away from the side of the bowl, you know that it's just saturated enough and that's it. This looks good to me, so that's where we're going to stop. We're going to put it down and no more mixing. To give our flour enough time to completely hydrate and soak up all that buttermilk, we're going to cover it with a piece of plastic wrap and put it in the fridge while we assemble the rest of this recipe. On the stove top, we have 2 chicken breasts with just enough water to cover them, and we're going to add about a teaspoon of salt to this, 2 or 3 peeled cloves of garlic, and 1 spoonful of better than bouillon. If you don't have this, a regular chicken bouillon cube would be just fine. Mix this in and then bring everything to a simmer. Allow it to cook for 15 minutes, turn off the heat, and put it on a plate and allow it to come to room temperature completely before proceeding. You can use this downtime to get all your ingredients ready for your soup and cut up your vegetables. With our chicken breasts at room temperature, we are going to shred them using 2 forks, so go ahead and start shredding that into bite-sized pieces. Or if alternatively you'd like, you could use a knife and cut this up, but again, wait until it's at room temperature so that it doesn't juice out. After shredding all of my chicken, I like to throw a few tablespoons of the liquid that I cooked it in over the top just to add a little bit extra flavor and moisture. Let's get our vegetables prepped up. I have a few carrots here that I've chopped into nice small bite-sized pieces. I'm going to put those into a large pot. Next up, I have a few potatoes that I've cut again in pieces that are going to fit onto a fork or spoon nicely, so something about that size. We're going to toss these in with our carrots, and then finally I'm going to add a third of a head cauliflower, and once again, nice bite-sized pieces. Now, this is my vegetation mix today, guys, and honestly, you can use anything you'd like. If you want to add other things in here, go for it. Right here, celery would go very well, so go ahead and throw in whatever sounds good to you. Cover everything completely with water, bring to a boil, and cook until they're about 3/4 of the way done. Drain and set aside for later. Remember that they're going to cook for a little bit longer in the pot pie in the oven, so you don't want to cook it until it's completely done, otherwise it'll be mush later on. Now let's get our soup going. We have 2 tablespoons of butter in a medium-sized saucepan over medium heat. To this, we're going to add a white onion chopped nice and fine. Half a teaspoon of salt goes over this. Half a teaspoon black pepper. Half teaspoon celery seeds. Give it a few shakes of paprika. And finish this out with a couple of shakes of cayenne. We're going to go ahead and cook this over the medium heat, sweating our onion for about 5 minutes. With our onions nice and sweated, we're going to add 2 cloves of minced garlic. Stir this in and cook it for about a minute. 1 spoonful of better than bouillon or a chicken bouillon cube goes in. followed by one whole can, that's going to be 14 ounces of chicken stock or chicken broth. 1 cup of whole milk goes into our soup, and then we're going to make a slurry using about 4 to 6 tablespoons of cornstarch and 4 to 6 more tablespoons of that whole milk. Go ahead and drop your cornstarch into the whole milk and make sure to mix it up really well before we add it. With our soup at a full simmer here, we can begin thickening it. I like to add half the slurry mixture, stir, and allow it to come back up to a simmer before I check on the thickness. From here, I gauge it whether I want it thicker or if it's okay as is. So now after adding this first half of the slurry to my soup, it's not quite thick enough. I'd like to make it a little thicker, and that's perfectly fine. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my slurry mixture and add the rest in while stirring. And remember that it has to come back up to a simmer in order for the slurry to thicken. You can make this as thick or as thin as you like. It really depends on you, but try not to make it too thin, otherwise it won't hold together very well in the pot pie. This is also a great time to make sure to test for all of the seasonings and make sure that everything is to your liking. And it's finally time for assembly. Our first layer is going to be made from 1/2 of our shredded chicken. So go ahead and put this into our pan and spread it out nice and thin over that bottom layer. Then on top of this, we're going to put half of our vegetable mixture and spoon that out evenly. If you wanted to use peas, right here is where you put them in. They don't even have to be cooked. You can put them in frozen. Just go ahead and spread them out with this level of vegetables. Now on top of this, we're going to place the other half of our shredded chicken, again making sure to spread it evenly over the top so that everybody gets some chicken in every bite. Take a second to spread out the ingredients evenly on each layer, and you can press down lightly with a fork, but what you want to avoid doing is pressing down like super hard and crushing it in. That'll make it really, really dense, and that's not what you're looking for. You're still looking for light layers and you want the soup to flow through. The top layer is the other half of our vegetable mixture, and then we are going to cover everything in our delicious soup. Now, this is a thicker soup here, and it's going to take a minute to kind of percolate down through all the vegetables and the chicken. So I recommend pouring about half the soup on top, and then you don't have to sit here and shake it back and forth like a jello mold for a little bit, and that soup will work its way down as you can see here. Now, as it works its way down, just go ahead and pour on a little bit more soup, keep shaking it, and work it down until everything is well saturated. All right, it's finally time to roll out our biscuits for the top. Our dough has been sitting in the fridge, hydrating this time as we've been working on the rest of the pie. We'll begin by spreading out a nice layer of flour all over our table or our work surface and on top of our dough. To make biscuits, it's really a process of folding the dough over itself, rolling it flat and folding it over, and doing this repeatedly to create hundreds and hundreds of flaky layers of dough and fat. Now, you want to try to do this while not overworking your dough because that can make them tough. So you really want to try to be gentle with this. As you can see here, I'm going to roll it out flat, fold it over, roll it flat, add a little bit more flour as I go so that nothing is sticking, and then keep doing this. Now, I've recorded and showed this entire process in full speed without any editing so you can see how little time it takes. The folding process that I've done here in front of you is all you really want to do. It won't look completely flat or completely perfect, that's fine. Once the dough has a nice solid surface and is holding together fairly well, that's where you want to stop. You're going to end up working this dough just a little bit more as we do our final rollout, and of course as you cut biscuits and take the scraps and form them back in, you'll work it a little bit more. So this looks good. We're going to finish this off by putting a little bit more flour on top and then gently rolling this out into a nice thick layer. How thick is completely up to you. I ended up rolling mine out kind of thin because I wanted more of a pie crust type thickness than a biscuit. However, if you want to make these like a nice solid inch thick and have them bake up to be 2.5 inches thick and be nice and fluffy, that'll work as well. It's all up to you. Now, using a biscuit cutter, or in my case, a cookie cutter, hey, it was either this or a Christmas tree. That's what I have. We're going to cut out biscuits. Now, I don't recommend that you use something like a coffee mug or a cup because the edges are not sharp enough to cut through these layers. They'll kind of crush them down and your biscuits won't rise correctly. So if you don't have a biscuit cutter or cookie cutter, you can use something like a knife or even a pizza cutter, but you want to make sure that the edges are nice and sharp. Now, of course, once you've cut out as many biscuits as you can from your first layer here, you can go ahead and recycle your scraps by pressing them back together here gently and forming them back into a ball. Again, try not to work this any more than you absolutely have to make sure that it sticks together. So a couple of times pressing it down, flattening it out is all you really want to do. You're going to press this together and form a ball. Use your rolling pin to spread it back out into a nice layer about the same thickness so that everything bakes correctly. Cut out biscuits and go from there until you've used it all up. Now, place your cut biscuits on top of your pot pie. Now, when you're placing them on here, you actually want the edges to touch slightly if you can, because they kind of help each other rise, like giving each other a hand in the oven. So if they're touching, they'll actually get a little taller and a little bit more fluffy. Aw, isn't that cute? This goes into an oven at 400 degrees for about 30 to 35 minutes. And half an hour later, we have this beauty. Now, you're going to want to let this sit at room temperature for about 10 minutes so that it can cool down and so the soup can thicken completely. All there is left now to do is serve up and enjoy you absolutely will. Guys, it really is just that easy to make this delectable comfort food right at home tonight. I want to thank each and every one of you for watching today. I really hope I inspired you to try this at home. And since you're still here, maybe try out one of these other videos that's recommended to you. I think you might like them. I hope to see you guys again here real soon on Middle Mist Gourmet.